What's going on, guys? Kulprit here, and today we're going to talk about choosing the proper weapon. Now, you can do this at a macro level, choosing the proper weapon to use continually, choosing the proper weapon to master, as I'm doing in my Reboot Camp series where I'm trying to work on my game. I went through this process and I identified the M4 116 as the weapon I'm going to master initially. I did that, like I said, because it provides me the best foundation to thereby learn recoil compensation, tap fire, these types of things, my new sensitivity, my new mechanics, and then from there, once I've mastered that weapon, it gives me a good platform to then move on to other ones. You could do that at a larger level, or you can do it for each individual map, each individual game mode, map, whatever. Maybe you're changing your playstyle. Again, you need to go through this process, identify which weapons should work, and then picking out the best weapon for you. So I'm going to kind of walk you guys through how I do that process, and towards the end, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about how I analyze statistics on Simtic.com. Now doing my Gun Locker series where I've kind of reviewed a lot of weapons. I've really kind of gotten to know that website as well as how the stats work in Battlefield 4 and which ones I kind of prioritize, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the video. So first and probably foremost, you have to know your own strengths. You have to be honest with yourself. What are you good at? What are your weaknesses? What are you bad at? Again, I'm going to stress, be honest with yourself. We all want to be the beast guy. We all want to be the slayer. We all want to be the 5 KD guy. Are you really? Is that strengths, and can you actually be that? Like, that's kind of a realization that I'm going through right now, especially in Battlefield 4, is I want to be that guy, clearly. I think we all do, but I don't think I can get there how I'm doing it now, and that's why I'm going through and changing things and changing my fundamentals and building my game back up. You also have to recognize that different games have different, react differently with you. Battlefield 3, I was more mobile, I was more run and gun, I was more aggressive. Battlefield 4, with the changes within that game and time to kill and one-hit kills and things like that, I've had to slow it down, play a more passive game, play a more cover-to-cover, I hesitate to say defensive because I'm not defensive, but I'm not as aggressive. I'm more passive, I'm more neutral, I let the game come to me more. That just works for me. I know other guys that can still go and be monsters and be aggressive and stuff. Good for them, but that's not me, and you have to be honest with yourself. And this is where sometimes if you can record your gameplay, I know Shadowplay, if you have an NVIDIA card, doesn't really do much with the system performance, and you can record your gameplays. Your hurdle might be hard drive space and things, but you can record your most recent couple gameplays, go back and watch, and honestly watch and critique yourself and figure out, all right, I'm pretty good at this range, but I'm not so good at that range. I'm good at tactics, but I'm not good at reacting, and be honest with yourself and identify what your strengths and weaknesses are, because if you don't do that properly, everything I talk about after this is going to be either incorrect or off target. Secondly, you want to identify the right tool for the job, and I don't necessarily mean which specific gun here, but just know what type of gun you should be using. Know your strengths and weaknesses again, and incorporate that here. Know the maps and modes and what they call for, and what situations you're most likely to get into. Are you playing Operation Locker or Operation Metro, or are you playing Gauntlet Railway and Dragon Pass? These are big, fulcrum kind of decisions you have to identify. Are you playing Rush, or are you playing Domination? Are you playing Obliteration, or are you playing Diffuse? I mean, these are things that are absolutely going to influence your choice in weaponry. Just note that there are more medium-range maps in Battlefield 4 than any other. Yes, I mean, obviously we can point to the big maps like Gauntlet and Dragon Pass and Silk Road and say, yeah, of course, there's long line of sights there and stuff. But think about the other close quarter maps that we think of. Mostly Locker. I mean, obviously Metro is kind of in its own class. But let's look at Locker for a minute. Even within Locker, which is a CQB map, we have a lot of medium plus line of sights. I mean, think of Snow. Snow is all medium range, if not long range. Even indoors, you got the cell block, I think it's C-Flag, and the tower in there. There's a lot of medium range engagements there. So just be aware of that if you're not sure, lean at least towards the medium range weapons. Don't force a weapon into a role. Just because everybody else is using X weapon, don't think that you should be using it necessarily as well. It might not suit you. It may not suit the role you're playing. It may not suit the map you're using. You don't use a hammer to chop down a tree. Use the right tool for the job, and just keep that in mind. Don't just follow the pack. Ask why they're using that weapon. Are they a different player than I am? What works for me? Again, I'm going to keep reiterating that. What you want to think about is what are the ranges that I'm going to most likely be working in. And this goes from point 1, knowing your strengths, how you're going to play the game overall, to what game modes, what game maps are you playing. Are you going to be, more short range engagements? Think interior type engagements around MCOMs, objective radiuses, surprise engagements, reactionary engagements. Think short range. This is type of, PDWs, the higher rate of fire fire carbines, things like that. If that's your game, if you're pushing, you're literally laying on your stomach on the objective point, perhaps short-range weapons are going to be for you. Now, medium-range weapons, again, a most common engagement in Battlefield 4. These, of course, give you the most flexibility. There's a lot of weapons that fit in this niche, and they also then are pretty good at short range, and then there's medium range that are pretty good at long range. These are kind of your utility weapons, ones that I personally favor myself. And then, of course, there's long-range weapons. But what you have to keep in mind is I don't really like outfitting myself for long range. The reason is, whether you're good at a long-range shot or not, a lot of times you have to ask yourself, should I be taking this shot? You might not be in your best interest, even if you can get that kill, to take that shot, because the cost of that engagement might far outweigh the benefit of getting the kill. Just keep that in mind. Again, I don't like outfitting for long range, but I know some of you guys do enjoy that, so I wanted to mention that. How do you decide the strength of each weapon? Is a weapon a short-range weapon, medium-range weapon, long-range weapon? Well, one of the best ways I like to do that, obviously, is playing with it. Clearly, you have to play with a weapon, get your personal opinion on that weapon, but then I go over to Synthic, and I like to pull up the stats. And what I like to do is not just look at a weapon stats, because stats in and of themselves can really mislead you, but I like to compare them to other weapons, and I typically have basis of comparison weapons, one of those being the M4-116 and Ace 23. I always load those two up, and then any other weapon I want to look at, I will throw in another weapon. Now, if I have, let's say I want to look at the L85. L85 just came out, I want to compare it. I'll throw up the M416, the Ace 23, the L85, and then I might throw in like the AUG or the SCAR, just to kind of round it out, and I'll pull up the multi-weapon comparison. This is one of the best parts about Synthic.com. And right there, it'll show me all the weapon statistics side by side. So now not only can I see the L85 stats, but I can compare them very quickly to the weapon I consider the most vanilla utility weapon in the game, the 416, and the Ace 23 that we all know is very popular. Or perhaps I'm going to throw in, like I said, the SCAR H, which is also very popular, more of a heavy hitter, kind of sets out of that mold a little bit, or the AUG, which is more of a longer range weapon, I feel, medium to long range weapon, slower firing, you know, gives you more of a reference point based on those three weapons to then compare the L85 to. So one of the things I quickly look at, obviously, rate of fire. Rate of fire is a big stat. It's very important. This is going to tell you how easily you're going to win gunfights short and medium range. What you do need to understand, though, is that high rate of fire is not always good. For a medium range weapon, long range weapon, rate of fire cannot be good. Something that is more important for a medium range weapon, long range weapon would be muzzle velocity. You know, how quickly your bullet gets there, it decides how little you have to lead your target. That, I would say, is almost more important, but you do want a pretty good rate of fire. There's definitely too little that's going to be holding you back on closer to medium range engagement. So rate of fire, you want to find your sweet spot, what you're able to control, ammunition conservation, those types of things. Reload time. Reload time is very important for me. I reload habitually all the time. It's a crutch of mine. I need to improve on that, but reload is very important to me. I find myself a majority of my deaths, whether right or wrong, come when I'm reloading or med pack or something like that. But this is a big consideration to me. It's often, sometimes when I look at a weapon, it's one thing that will very much hold me down. Actually, speaking of the L85, it is basically one of the big reasons I don't use that as a primary weapon, to be quite honest. I spoke about muzzle velocity. Again, this is a big one I like because it lets me know how accurate this is going to be at medium range, long range, how much I have to lead a target, those types of things. General recoil, I just look very quickly at the recoil. What I kind of do is I look at the vertical recoil quickly, and then what I do is I take the horizontal recoils and I just add them up. This gives me a very quick reference of how much recoil this gun has. I do look at the recoil a little more detail, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. But just as a general recoil, I look at the vertical. I'm not as concerned with vertical unless it's something really crazy. And then I look at the horizontal, and I just add the two left and right, and just it gives me a quick analysis, quick reference to how much horizontal recoil this weapon has. And then I look at the general spreads and accuracies. Again, I look at this very quickly, and one thing that's nice in Synthic, they kind of color code it. Green, it has a, you know, it's a strength of the weapon, its accuracy, its spread. Red, you're gonna start getting into the less accurate weapons. Might be close quarter weapon, whereas at ranges, it's gonna start to spread really quite a bit and be kind of really hard to handle. Now, like I said, I look at some of these more detailed, and I go down into the recoil section. Now, I look at the vertical recoil. Well, what you have to understand is vertical recoil is the better recoil to have. It's more manageable, both as a person with the mouse in your hand, as well as through attachments, which we'll talk about. Horizontal recoil is a recoil you want to kind of stay away from. Again, you can compensate for this, but it's not as easy. You have one attachment mostly, whereas it's harder to, you know, you can't really compensate for horizontal recoil with your mouse. Obviously, vertical recoil, you can just pull down on the mouse as you're firing, or your controller, it's easier to pull down. Whereas you have a lot of left or right horizontal recoil, you can't compensate for that with the physical movement of the mouse. First shot recoil is something I definitely look at. I like to tap fire a lot. I like to play a medium engagement. I'm tap firing a lot first shot recoil is considered then and there. If I'm having a lot of first shots, each burst, each tap is a first shot. It's a very high first shot recoil. It's something I need to consider. Of course, I can compensate that with an angled foregrip as well. Recoil reset is another one I do like to look at. I don't weigh it that heavily, but I do look at it. This kind of tells me how quickly the gun will reset. And now this is something I'm trying to move away from in my reboot series. As I'm trying to tell you guys, I'm trying not to let the gun reset as much. What I typically have done is I tap fire, I burst fire, and I almost let the weapon bounce. I let it come back down to 0 and shoot again. Well, that was why this kind of factor affected me quite a bit. I knew it was a bad habit, but it was how I played. I recognized that, so I took this factor into account. Now, hopefully, as I move forward in the next month or two, I will be able to recoil more for the compensate for the recoil more. So this rating here will become less and less important to me. But it is something you should notice, because some weapons, they all typically tend to have the same one, but a couple of them every now and then have quite a low reset time. Well, a reset rating. It's actually inverse there, I think, which you should just be conscious of when selecting a weapon. It might be kind of a tiebreaker type thing. And then lastly, I look at the accuracy more in detail. I look at the accuracy while I'm standing still. I look at the ADS accuracy while I'm standing still, the ADS spread while I'm moving, and I look at those two. And quickly, you'll usually be able to tell, all right, this gun is made to be on the move. Think of the AUG. It has very kind ADS while moving, which is something I tend to like. I'm more a movement guy. I'm trying to move away from that, pun intended, I guess. Trying to change that, be more stationary, be more cover, be more passive, understand how Battlefield 4 works. You just got to have a much better accuracy standing than moving, no matter what the weapon's rating is. The overall core mechanic of the game wants you to be standing still. Understand that. Hip fire, I look at. I only really pay attention to hip fire on the move. That's the only time I tend to hip fire, is when you're like, oh shit, and you're doing that dance and you guys are spinning on each other. Hip fire standing, I just don't think it carries much weight. I look at the hip fire on the moves. Again, even then, I don't pay a lot of attention to that, because the hip fire accuracy is a secondary accuracy for me and my play style, but it might be more important to you guys if you're a run and gun, up in your face type of guy. And I do look at the accuracy increase per shot, and this basically tells you the longer you hold down the trigger, how much your cone of accuracy is going to expand. Now, this is kind of like the recoil reset. It's not as important. It's just going to kind of give you an indication how quickly this weapon gets out of control. You'll notice on LMGs, this is pretty high, because as you open full auto, that cone just blows up and huge. It's just going to kind of give you, it's kind of an indication of where they see this weapon fitting. Low rating for this, it would be more of a medium type weapon, but understand that this is pretty much for full auto, and nobody should really be firing full auto unless you're in a panic engagement. You should be tap firing or burst firing only, and that's going to really kind of negate this rating quite a bit. So that's kind of how I look at a weapon. I'm going to do another video talking about how I then load that weapon out and what attachments I think I use. I'm also using quite a bit different attachment setup for my reboot camp, and kind of going through it and changing my philosophy a little bit, changing how I think about things a little bit, which is kind of interesting. But I'm going to get to that as I have more time played. But for now, this is kind of the process I go through when identifying a weapon, either in a grand scheme of what weapon I'm going to use as a primary weapon. I tend to have 2 or 3 or 4 stable weapons that I use as my primaries. They tend to have the most kills, the ones I go to when I'm comfortable, the ones I go to when I need to try hard, and those are my staple of 4 or 5 guns, be it a couple ARs, maybe a carbine and an LMG, that type of thing, and that's what I stick with. Those are the ones, my fail-safes. Then if I'm playing a particular map or I'm playing a particular style of role, I'm going to sit here, and obviously once you've done this a lot, you can kind of do it on the fly, and you almost have guns saved for certain roles and certain type of maps and modes and engagements, and you'll kind of get an idea of what you like to use. But you should kind of think about these things and kind of identify what works for you. And just because it works for some guy next to you and he's got a 30 and 5 KD doesn't mean you need to go pick up that weapon. And understand, stats on paper can be misleading. They don't always add up. Your primary kind of deciding factor should be, how does it feel to you? Just because the M416 has a more vertical recoil on paper on Synthic than the Ace 23, who goes up and a little to the right, for all you know, look at your stats after 500 or 600 kills and see. You might have a higher accuracy with the Ace 23. On paper, the 416 is better because it's more vertical. It's easier to compensate. But maybe your natural pull on the mouse is a little down and to the left, and the Ace 23 just fits you better. Again, proof is in the performance, but again, the caveat there, make sure you have enough stats, you have enough engagement time with the weapon to really make a judgment. I would say no less than 500 kills. If you're looking at anything under than that, you're going to have a lot more variance and things that can kind of just mess it up a little bit. So make sure you put the time in with a weapon before you really start judging it, and I think you'll be all right. So I hope that helped you out, guys. That's the process I go through. Again, another long video. I'm trying to shorten these, but I'm trying to pack a lot of information in them. Let me know if you enjoyed it. Hit that like button. I'll continue to make some more. Like I said, next I'm going to go into attachments and how I outfit a weapon once I've identified the one I want to use. Like always, guys, I really appreciate the support. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.